When most people think about net worth, their minds immediately jump to billionaires like Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett sitting on mountains of cash. But here's the thing that might shock you. The average person's net worth numbers are probably nothing like what you'd expect, and they reveal some pretty uncomfortable truths about where most of us actually stand financially. My name is Nick, and I help people understand the real numbers behind personal wealth and financial independence. If you're curious about how your financial situation compares to everyone else, or if you want to know whether you're actually doing better or worse than you think, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like if it helps clarify things for you. Now, before we dive into these numbers that might make you feel either surprisingly good or slightly uncomfortable about your financial position, we need to clear up a massive misconception that trips up almost everyone. When people hear the term net worth, they immediately think it's about how much money you make each year. Wrong. Your salary could be $200,000 annually, but if you're drowning in debt and living paycheck to paycheck, your actual net worth might be close to zero or even negative. Net worth is beautifully simple in concept, but reveals everything about your true financial health. Take everything you own that has value, subtract everything you owe to other people, and what's left is your net worth. Sounds easy enough, right? Well, the reality of calculating this number often becomes a wake-up call that many people aren't prepared for. Let's walk through how this actually works with a real example. Imagine you own a home worth $400,000, drive a car worth $30,000, and have various other possessions, bank accounts, and investments totaling another $20,000. On paper, you're looking at $450,000 in total assets. Not bad, you might think. But here's where reality kicks in. You still owe $280,000 on your mortgage, $15,000 on your car loan, and let's say you've got $8,000 in credit card debt because life happens. That's $303,000 you owe to various lenders. Subtract that from your assets, and your actual net worth is $147,000. Still respectable, but significantly less impressive than that initial $450,000 figure, isn't it? This is exactly why so many people have a distorted view of their financial position. They focus on what they own without properly accounting for what they owe. The Federal Reserve conducts a comprehensive survey every 3 years to track exactly where American households stand financially. And let me tell you, the results are eye-opening. The most recent data reveals some numbers that will probably surprise you, and not necessarily in a good way. When researchers calculated the average net worth across all American households, they found a number that seems almost too good to be true, $748,000. Before you start feeling terrible about your own situation, there's a crucial detail you need to understand about this figure. That average gets completely skewed by the ultra-wealthy. When you have billionaires and multimillionaires in the mix, their massive wealth pulls that average way up, making it seem like everyone's doing much better than reality suggests. It's like saying the average height in a room is 7 feet when there's one basketball player and 9 average-sized people. The median net worth tells a much more realistic story about where typical American families actually stand. The median is the middle point where half of households have more and half have less, and that number is $121,000. Still a decent amount, but far more achievable and representative of what regular people are actually working with. Now, here's where things get really interesting and probably more relevant to your actual situation. These numbers vary dramatically based on age, and the patterns reveal some fascinating insights about how wealth typically builds over a lifetime. If you're under 35 and feeling like you're behind financially, the data might actually make you feel a lot better. The median net worth for households where the primary earner is under 35 is just $13,900. Yes, you read that correctly. Less than $14,000. This makes perfect sense when you think about it. People in their 20s and early 30s are typically just starting their careers, often dealing with student loan payments, and many haven't yet purchased a home or had time for investments to grow significantly. They might be spending money on establishing themselves professionally, building their careers, or simply figuring out what they want to do with their lives. There's another factor that dramatically impacts these numbers, and it's something many people don't fully appreciate until they experience it themselves. Homeownership creates a massive divide in net worth statistics. According to the same Federal Reserve data, homeowners have a median net worth of $255,000, while renters sit at just $6,300. That's not a typo. The difference between owning and renting creates a wealth gap of nearly $250,000. This happens because homeowners are essentially forced to save money through their mortgage payments, building equity while their property potentially appreciates in value. Renters, on the other hand, are essentially paying someone else's mortgage without building any equity for themselves. As people move into their mid-30s to mid-40s, the median net worth jumps to $91,000. This increase makes sense because careers are becoming more established, incomes are rising, and many people in this age group have purchased homes and started contributing to retirement accounts more consistently. But even at this stage, many households are still struggling with competing financial priorities. Kids are expensive, mortgages are substantial, and the temptation to upgrade lifestyles as income increases can prevent significant wealth accumulation. It's the age where many people start feeling like they should have more saved, but are still figuring out how to balance current needs with future planning. The 45 to 54 age group sees more substantial progress, with median net worth reaching $168,000. By this point, many families have been paying down their mortgages for years, their earning potential has likely peaked or is approaching its peak, and hopefully, retirement planning has become a more serious priority. However, this is also the age where lifestyle inflation can become a real wealth killer. People start feeling like they've earned the right to nicer cars, better vacations, and upgraded homes. While there's nothing wrong with enjoying the fruits of your labor, these decisions can significantly impact long-term wealth building if not managed carefully. The 55 to 64 age group reaches a median net worth of $212,000, representing steady but not dramatic growth from the previous decade. This is typically when people start getting serious about retirement planning because it's no longer some distant concept but a reality they'll face within the next decade. Income often begins to plateau during this period, and some people start working fewer hours or taking on less demanding roles. The fortunate ones in this group are seeing their investments compound significantly and their mortgages approach being paid off completely. Others are realizing they haven't saved nearly enough and are scrambling to catch up. When people hit the traditional retirement age of 65 to 74, something interesting happens with the numbers. The median net worth reaches $266,000, which represents only a modest increase from the previous age group. This might seem puzzling at first, but it actually makes perfect sense when you think about what's happening in people's lives at this stage. So as many folks are transitioning out of their peak earning years, some are starting to draw from their retirement accounts rather than contributing to them, and healthcare costs are beginning to creep up in ways that can genuinely surprise people. It's like finally reaching the top of a mountain only to realize you now have to carefully manage your descent. Here's where the story takes an interesting turn that most people don't see coming. The 75 and older group actually sees their median net worth drop to $254,000. This is the first and only age group where the numbers actually go backward, and before you panic thinking this means financial disaster, let me explain why this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Think about it logically. At some point, you're supposed to spend the money you've accumulated over your lifetime. What's the point of hoarding wealth if you never get to enjoy it? Many people in this age group are finally taking those dream vacations they postponed for decades, helping their grandchildren with college expenses, or simply living more comfortably than they did during their wealth accumulating years. The key word here is balance. There's a difference between strategically using your wealth to enhance your golden years and accidentally outliving your money because you didn't plan properly. Nobody wants to be the person who's 90 years old and still working at the grocery store because they ran out of funds. Now, before you start comparing your net worth to these numbers and either feeling smug or spiraling into financial anxiety, let me share something that might completely change how you think about this whole concept. Net worth, while useful, doesn't tell you the complete story about your financial health or when you might achieve true financial independence. Consider this scenario. Someone has a net worth of $5 million, which sounds incredibly impressive until you learn that $4.5 million of that is tied up in an enormous mansion they can't afford to maintain. And they're still working 60-hour weeks to cover their monthly expenses. Meanwhile, someone else has a net worth of just $300,000, but it's all invested in income-producing assets that cover their living expenses, allowing them to retire comfortably. Who's in the better financial position? The millionaire who's house rich but cash poor, or the person with less total wealth but complete financial freedom? This is why focusing solely on net worth can sometimes lead you down the wrong path. What matters more than your total net worth is understanding the relationship between your passive income and your living expenses. If your investments, rental properties, or other income-generating assets produce enough money to cover your bills without you having to work, you've achieved something far more valuable than just hitting an impressive net worth number. This is where most people get their priorities completely backward. They become obsessed with accumulating assets and reaching specific net worth milestones, but they never stop to ask themselves the more important question: how much passive income do I need to live the life I want without depending on a paycheck? Let's say your monthly expenses are $4,000. If you can generate $4,000 per month from investments, rental income, or business profits, you're essentially financially independent, regardless of whether your total net worth is $500,000 or $5 million. Obviously, having more provides greater security and options, but the fundamental freedom remains the same. So, how do you actually improve your position and potentially surpass these median numbers? The strategies aren't particularly complicated, but they do require discipline and time to work their magic. First, you've got to tackle the debt side of the equation. Every dollar you owe to someone else is a dollar working against your net worth, and high interest debt like credit cards can absolutely destroy your wealth building efforts. If you're carrying credit card balances at 18 or 25% interest rates, paying those off often provides a better guaranteed return than any investment you could make. Think about it this way. Paying off a credit card charging 20% interest is equivalent to earning a guaranteed 20% return on your money, which is better than what most professional investors achieve consistently. Yet people will keep credit card debt while trying to pick winning stocks, which is like trying to fill a bucket with a massive hole in the bottom. The second strategy involves redirecting money toward assets that actually grow in value over time. This means investments like stocks, real estate, or businesses rather than things that depreciate like cars or gadgets. The wealthy understand that every dollar should ideally be working to generate more dollars, creating a compounding effect that builds momentum over years and decades. Here's something most people don't realize about wealth building. The first $100,000 is brutally difficult to accumulate, but it gets progressively easier from there. When you only have a few $1,000s invested, even great returns don't amount to much in dollar terms. But when you have 50 or 100,000 working for you, those same percentage returns start generating serious money that accelerates your progress. The third piece involves controlling your expenses without making yourself miserable in the process. This doesn't mean living like a monk and never enjoying anything, but it does mean being intentional about where your money goes. Many people unconsciously increase their spending every time their income rises, which keeps them trapped in the same financial position despite earning more money. The wealthy have a different relationship with money increases. When they get a raise or bonus, they typically save or invest most of it rather than immediately upgrading their lifestyle. This allows their wealth to compound much faster because they're consistently adding fuel to the fire rather than just maintaining the same small flame. Creating additional income streams represents the fourth strategy, and this has become easier than ever in today's economy. Whether it's freelancing skills you already possess, starting an online business, or developing passive income through investments, having money coming from multiple sources provides both security and acceleration in your wealth building journey. The final element, and perhaps the most important one, is simply understanding that building meaningful wealth takes time. We live in a culture that promises instant everything, but compound growth requires patience and consistency over years and decades. The people with impressive net worths didn't get there overnight, and trying to rush the process often leads to poor decisions that set you back rather than moving you forward. The reality is that most people are playing a completely different game than they think they're playing when it comes to building wealth. They're focused on looking wealthy rather than actually becoming wealthy. And there's a massive difference between the two approaches that these net worth statistics reveal in fascinating ways. Here's what I find genuinely amusing about human psychology and money. People will finance a $60,000 truck to look successful while their actual net worth sits at negative $20,000. Meanwhile, the millionaire next door might be driving a 10-year-old Honda and wearing clothes from Target. Guess which one is sleeping better at night? This brings up something that doesn't show up in these Federal Reserve numbers, but explains a lot about why so many people struggle to build wealth despite having decent incomes. It's what I call the Instagram economy effect. Social media has created this constant pressure to showcase a lifestyle that often exists only in carefully curated photos and borrowed luxury. People see their friends posting vacation photos from expensive resorts, showing off new cars or flaunting designer purchases, and they assume everyone else is doing better financially than they actually are. What you don't see in those photos are the credit card statements, the stress about making payments, or the complete lack of any emergency savings behind all that apparent prosperity. The truth is that many of those seemingly successful people posting the glamorous lifestyle shots have net worths that would shock you, and not in a good way. They've mastered the art of looking wealthy while remaining broke, which is essentially the opposite of what actually builds long-term financial security. This phenomenon helps explain why the median net worth numbers we discussed earlier are lower than most people would expect. A significant portion of the population is essentially spending their way to poverty while maintaining the appearance of success. It's like being the best dressed person at the bankruptcy hearing. Now, let me share something that might completely change how you view your own financial progress. These median numbers represent where people actually are, not where they should be or could be with better financial habits. If you're consistently saving money, avoiding high interest debt, and investing regularly, you're already ahead of a massive percentage of the population regardless of your current net worth. Think about what this means practically. If you're 30 years old with a net worth of $50,000, you might feel behind because that number seems small, but you're actually doing better than the median for your age group and significantly better than people who are living paycheck to paycheck despite earning more money than you do. The psychological aspect of wealth building is something these statistics can't capture, but is absolutely crucial to understand. Building wealth is largely a mental game that requires you to think differently about money than most people around you. It means saying no to purchases that would make you look more successful today in order to actually become more successful tomorrow. Here's where things get really interesting from a practical standpoint. The gap between different age groups reveals exactly when most people start taking their financial future seriously, and it's usually way later than it should be. That jump from the under 35 group to the 35 to 44 group tells a story about people finally waking up to reality. By their mid-30s, most people have experienced enough financial stress to realize that hoping everything will work out isn't actually a retirement plan. They've probably had a car breakdown without having money to fix it, or faced some other expense that made them realize living without savings is essentially financial Russian roulette. But here's the frustrating part that these numbers reveal. Even when people start getting serious about building wealth, they often make the same mistakes that keep them from reaching their potential. They focus on complex investment strategies when they haven't mastered the basics, or they try to time the market instead of just consistently putting money away. The people who actually build substantial wealth do boring things consistently over long periods of time. They max out their retirement account contributions, they buy index funds, and forget about them for decades. They pay extra on their mortgages, and they avoid lifestyle inflation even when their incomes increase significantly. It's not glamorous, it won't get you any likes on social media, and it definitely won't impress anyone at parties, but It works with mathematical certainty if you stick with it long enough. The compound growth that builds real wealth happens slowly at first, then all at once, which is why most people give up right before things start getting interesting. So there you have it. The real numbers behind American net worth that probably weren't what you expected. Whether you're feeling encouraged or slightly terrified by these statistics, remember that knowing where you stand is the first step toward improving your position. Don't get caught up chasing the appearance of wealth while ignoring the fundamentals that actually build it. Start where you are, be consistent with the basics, and let time work its magic. Your future self will thank you for the boring financial decisions you make today.